Ben, thanks for coming back to the channel. Appreciate you being here yet again.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here as always.
I said in the last video that I wanted to get your thoughts about 𝗲𝗏. And the challenge here is that, as you pointed out in your recent upload, that there is a 15% chance that there is not going to be a rate hike by December this year. What do you make of all this? What is 𝗲𝗏 doing? Why is inflation a choice? And what does this all mean for the stock market and for crypto?
Yeah, I mean, look, he actually said it right. I mean, inflation is a choice. We choose to print money. We choose to do all these things. And, you know, if you're going to increase the money supply by 40% in, you know, back during the pandemic for the next couple of years, it makes sense why the price of housing went up by about 40%, right? I mean, we don't have to have this level of inflation, but in order to not have it, they have to allow for lower asset prices. You know, and that's just not something that they've really been willing to do, and that's why it's taking so long, right? Like it's taken 5 years now, and the last time in headline CPI was at 2%, was back in 2021, right? And I mean, I think it hit like 2.4, but the last time it was actually at 2% or lower was like 5 years ago. So I mean, look, Kevin Warsh is a smart guy. He studied at Harvard. I think he studied it at Stanford as well. He's a smart guy. I do think inflation is a choice, and it will likely continue to be a choice. I just hope that they make that choice lower, right? Like I'd rather it be lower. I mean, I don't know about you, but I really like going to sporting events, you know? And one of the things I mean, I actually went to one of the World Cup warm-up matches. I took some of my kids to see the US play a few weeks ago. And, you know, I look at these games, and I was looking at going to another one, and in some of these matches, like the cheapest ticket is like $8,000.
It's ridiculous.
You know? I mean, I know, and I'm like, when did this happen? Like, when did we go from being able to like see this stuff? And I think I mean, inflation, right? I mean, we're gonna be those guys in 20 years telling our kids, well, back in my day, you know, you could go to a baseball game for $5 or $10. You know, when I was a kid, you could go for really, really cheap. Now it costs an arm and a leg to go. So I think that he's going to be faced with a difficult decision. He was obviously put at the Fed as the chair to cut rates, but he can't cut rates right now because inflation is. I mean, the administration has shot themselves in the foot with inflation recently, and that's causing the Fed unable to cut rates. So,
but that's
I
the
mean,
question.
probably...
But that's the question there, because people, you know, a couple of months ago, we were talking about the end of QT. We were talking about, you know, starting to print again. We we're talking about how the war will impact that, and it's just. And now we have someone coming in that previously said, although I agree with you, the consensus is that he's been picked by Trump to actually cut rates. He just simply can't do it. I mean, there is a point to it, and now this, what you just said again, I just watched your video, is that it's not only that he cannot cut, he's in a position where apparently there is 15% probability there will be no hikes this year. How does that ripple down? And also you said that 40% printing, this has happened throughout, you know, whatever administration. We've been looking at 20, 30 years, whatever. It's been printing. 𝗲𝗏 will not be able to change that, but can impact. The question is, how does that impact the stock market? What do you see this year, next year? And obviously the policy, especially now, they said it's not like forward looking, but what do you make of all this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times after a new Fed chair takes office, the market will kind of test them, right? And throw them a curveball, which is what I'm guessing is going to happen in the second half of this year. That's what I think is going to happen. I think there will likely be a correction in the markets. I don't know if they're actually going to hike rates. Like, there are times where the 2-year yield goes up and it looks like we have to follow it, but then it comes right back down. So, but the reality right now, though, is because rate hikes are getting priced in, the crypto markets are getting annihilated, right? It doesn't matter if the rate hikes happen or not. And you could argue that if they hike, by the time they actually hike rates, maybe the crypto bear market will be over because it would have been priced in by that point. And if they don't hike rates and they end up going to rate cuts, that'd also be bullish for crypto potentially later on this year. So for me, with Kevin Warsh, I mean, it is interesting. You know, I watched his entire interview, and I have no idea what he thinks about the economy. Like, I have absolutely no idea what he thinks about it.
Do you think it's on purpose? Like, I think the
Yeah,
fact that he also didn't put it in the dot plot, he didn't say anything. Like, it seems like that he's just playing it safe and be like, I didn't. Like,
right.
it's just, but that is that good?
Well, I don't know. Like, my first instinct, just to be brutally honest, my first instinct was to say, like, I don't like this. Like, I don't like that he's changing it and that he's not providing it. But then the more I thought about it, right, and then I was like, okay, I need to stop being an armchair economist and thinking I know better than like the chair of the Federal Reserve. I mean, this guy, again, he literally studied. He studied at Stanford. He studied at Harvard. He's not a dumb guy, right? So I
Yeah.
shouldn't pretend like I know more than him about this stuff. What I would say is that, if you look at the Fed's history of predicting things, it's not like they're great at predicting things, Like inflation is transitory in 2021, or I mean, even when Powell was in office not too long ago, he said it was highly unlikely that the next move would be a hike. He was always more leaning dovish, but now the committee is leaning more hawkish because of this geopolitical conflict that occurred in the Middle East. And hopefully that's over, but who knows, right? Like who knows?
Yeah.
It might come back just as quickly as it
I think
potentially is
I
over.
think it will, but I hope I'm not right. But I just
Right.
think it's
So I don't know. But I think that's the thing is like, he's probably looking at this and being like, well, we provide all this forward guidance in the past and we end up not following it most of the time. So perhaps there is some validity to the idea of,
yeah. But
just
my biggest problem with this is that I had a whoop. And my whoop was always telling me, it measures your sleep and all that, and it was always telling me it's right, so I took it off. So the fact
right.
that they didn't follow their forward-looking things is not the solution. Is not that we're not gonna do that anymore. We're just gonna reflect on it. And I still don't see how that. And also as a follow-up to that, again going back to this whole end of QT and not end of QT and whole crypto Twitter going crazy. I don't know, half a year ago about, oh my God, we're gonna start printing money. Yeah, Bitcoin is down another 30% since then. It's interesting to me that you're saying, in the previous video, we talked about when the bottom is in. We're going to link that as well in the description too. But it's interesting for me that you say that maybe we can see Bitcoin rally, even if it's a hike and even if it stays as it is or it's a cut. Why is that?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. And I actually spent a lot of time thinking about this. Two things. If they don't cut, right? If they don't cut, or sorry, if they don't hike, if the Fed does not hike later this year, and Bitcoin is currently, I mean, Bitcoin's going down because of the 4-year cycle, but the narrative could be that the Bitcoin is going down because, we're not getting looser monetary policy. Okay.
I think
If
that's the
all of
easiest
that-
one, if they don't hike.
Right. And we'll attack that one first. If they don't hike, then all that people are like, oh, we're worried about something that's not even happening, and therefore Bitcoin gets repriced higher. Okay. That's the easy one. The hard one is what if they hike? Now, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and here's the thing. If the Fed can hike rates into 2027, then what it means to me is that the economy is still strong, okay? Because throughout history, the Fed is not hiking during a collapsing economy. They're hiking during an economy that's actually doing fine. When the economy is collapsing, that's where they're aggressively cutting rates. So it's like the reverse of what you would think. So, Bitcoin went up in 2023 and 2024 while the Fed was raising rates. So it's not impossible for Bitcoin to go up while the Fed raises rates. I think that if the Fed were to raise rates, I mean, look at what happened in the late 90s. So in the late 90s, in the mid 90s, the Fed cut rates. Okay. And then in the late 90s, in like 98, 99 timeframe, the Fed realized they had reignited the animal spirits and they had to raise rates again. And they raised rates like 7 or 8 times. And while they were raising rates, the stock market just kept going up. And it was the Fed raising rates for the second time during that business cycle, maybe the third, that really finally caused the sort of the business cycle to come to an end. So what if, and I'm just speculating, what if the animal spirits that come back is the crypto market? Like what if that is the animal spirits this time where Bitcoin ends its 4-year cycle or it begins the new 4-year cycle, let's say in October, and Bitcoin starts going up and it lifts the rest of the market with it. And perhaps they don't raise rates as much as they should because Kevin Warsh doesn't want to raise rates. He wasn't put there to raise rates. He was put there to lower rates. there's a chance they run things hot and then they're forced to raise rates. And we also have to remember too that Kevin Warsh is one person. I mean,
Yeah.
he can't control what the rest of the committee does. I mean, he might have some influence on some of them. I don't know. But if everyone about him wants to raise rates, they're still going to raise rates, even if he doesn't want to. So I think that's how you could view it. If the Fed raises rates going into next year, it just means the economy is not falling apart. And if the economy is not falling apart and Bitcoin's priced very, very low, then I think that Bitcoin will be repriced higher.
Do you think there is a possibility that the whole strategy of the Fed going out with this dot plot is to just cool the stock market a little bit and then eventually have to? I just can't. Do you see the possibility that the economy is that strong that they can actually cut? Or is rather just, we see this, this is what we should do?
It's that strong that they could hike?
Yeah, sorry, hike, yes.
Yeah, look, the economy is really hard to predict, right? I mean, people have been calling for the economy to crash for the last like 4 or 5 years, right? So I don't know like exactly when that's going to happen, but when I look at the labor market, when I look at initial claims, I look at hiring and all that stuff, like things just aren't that bad yet for the labor market. I know it seems like they are, but they're just not. And I think one of the main reasons is during the pandemic, a lot of companies had a hard time hiring people, and they've been really slow to lay people off. Now, it's really hard to find a new job. So for new college grads, it's really hard to find a job right now. And if you get laid off, it's really hard to find a new job. But there are still jobs out there. And if you look at layoffs, we're basically just at pre-pandemic levels. Like we're not at crazy levels. I know there's headlines about layoffs, but it's not really different than what we've seen historically. So I think that the economy has been fine. And you have to remember too, in order for the recession to happen, you have to have lower asset prices that stay lower for a while. So until you get lower asset prices, like in the stock, and I'm talking about crypto, because I mean the majority of people have stocks, not Bitcoin. But until you get lower asset prices, it's like premature to call for a recession. Now, I do believe there will be a recession at the end of the business cycle, just like there is at the end of every business cycle. But predicting exactly the month and year that occurs is really, really hard. And the thing that I've said before is instead of trying to predict when it happens, the market will usually give you a sign, right? So think about with Bitcoin. What happened with Bitcoin in 2025? It just went sideways for a year, right? It didn't make any progress. We hit 109 on January 20th, and we only went marginally higher for the rest of the year. So if we get to a point where the stock market does the same thing, where it's only marginally going higher for say 6 or 12 months, that's when you start to be like, all right, like we're probably starting to top out here and go. Because remember, topping is a process. Bottoming is an event, right? Like capitulations are events that happen like that, but topping is a process that takes many, many months. And that's the reason why I think with the stock market, it's usually easiest to just wait for the market to give you a signal. Because a lot of people look back at 2020 and they're like, oh, well, the top's going to happen and it's going to drop 35% overnight. But that's a black swan, right? Like that's a pandemic. Yes. And that is not representative of what most tops look like for the stock market.
Ben, I appreciate you. I think it's super exciting what's going to happen. And I just hope for the best, pray for the best. We're going to see October at the bottom, maybe potentially the summer bottom. We'd love to have you back on here. Obviously, we're going to link all your channels and everything down in the description and also put it there so people can go and subscribe. Truly appreciate you, as always. And yeah, I will definitely see you here again, hopefully.
And if you guys are watching from my channel, make sure you give him a sub as well, because he's also one of the no, I mean, look, there haven't been a lot of people that were on the right side of the market, but there have been a few, and he's one of them. So make sure you guys give him a follow.
Appreciate you, Ben. Appreciate you. I will see you here soon. Ciao, ciao.
See ya.